red thread wrapped in a spinning wheel, give it a kick to turn for the fairy tale to begin. Once upon a time, high in the sky there was a place called Cloudville that many little stars called home. These little stars were happy and bright, and each one had its own color. You could not spot two of the same color. They lived happily in their hometown, all day sleeping, and in the evenings they would go out in their backyard to play. The people on earth saw them and thought they were sparks in the sky that light up their nights. The little stars knew that and were laughing. You see, they did not care at all how people called them. They knew they were stars, and that was enough for them. The Cloudville had no houses, but big soft nests of fluffy clouds with many little beds instead. A trunk with their clothes and toys was at the end of its little bed. The beds were never far from each other. They were always two, one next to the other, so that the little stars would never feel lonely. Mrs. Lalou, a big white bear, and her husband, Mr. Arcturus, took care of the cloud house. The little stars loved them so very much. At the crack of dawn, as soon as the light came out, they helped them bathe and get cleaned in order to sit around the table and enjoy the delicious meal Mrs. Lalou had prepared with love and care. When that was over, they put on their pajamas and lay down on their little beds, giggling. Then Mr. Arcturus would bring out his magical enormous book of mythical tales and would read them an amazing story until they could fall asleep with a smile on their faces. This fairy tale I am about to share is about two such stars, Alpha Baby and Beta Baby, also called Alphita and Betula, whose colors were so similar that all the other stars often could not tell them apart. Even Mr. Arcturus sometimes was confused. Only Mrs. Lalou could clearly spot their difference at once. Many times they even changed their clothes to confuse her, but she never fell for that. She would shake the spoon she was holding in a funny way and tell them, "I don't care about your wrapping. I've known you since you were born. Now change back your clothes and come to it." This is how the time passed in Cloudville. The little stars would rest all day, and every night they would go out to play in the dark sky. In fact, they really liked to play hide and seek, and when they hid behind the clouds, the people who saw the little lights flashing up above could not understand what was going on and look in wonder. Let's leave the little stars play in the night sky for a while, and let's go down to earth and see what's happening there. Things are reversed here. Children play all day long and sleep all night. Do you know why this happens? Well, at night, because of darkness, it is very difficult to find your way around the house. You have to be careful not to fall and hurt your knees. So, on Earth, in a small neighborhood in Athens, lived a couple, John and Jane. They lived in the same house because they did not want to be away from each other, even for 1 second. Every morning they went to work, and in the afternoon they candled at home or went for long walks. They also had a big dog with long hair and big ears that kept them company and guarded them. Very often they would all go for a walk in a nearby park, sit on a bench, and look at the sky. Although they were happy, they felt that something was missing. So every time they went to the park, they looked up and prayed to heaven to send them two little girls. But the answer took long to come, and John and Jane got worried. One day, their four-legged friend decided to take a letter to Cloudville asking for help. He said goodbye to John and Jane, since he would not return from this trip. He took the letter and left for the Cloudville in joy. When he got outside the big fluffy gate, he rang the bell and waited. As soon as the door opened, Mrs. Lalou looked at him, intrigued, and asked, "Good morning. What brings you by?" "I'm coming on behalf of Jane and John. Do you know them?" "Oh, yes. I see them every night sending their prayers to the sky. But unfortunately, this time of the year, the weather is very windy and it blows them away. What do they want?" "They want two little stars to have as their children. They are sending you this letter too. Can you please send them to them?" "Did you say two?" "Yes, two please, and if possible, let them be girls." "Okay, let me talk to my husband, Mr. Arcturus, and I will see what we can do. But first, I will get you something to eat. You have come a long way, and you still have a long journey ahead of you to the dog town. Just be careful not to make a sound, because all the little stars are sleeping now." That is how it was done. Mrs. Lalou prepared him a toothsome meal, so yummy that he licked his plate and went on to his sky home in joy. After he was gone, she sat down to think which little stars she should send down to Earth. Mr. Arcturus had to look at his enormous book of people with all their photos to see which stars better matched John and Jane. At the time, her husband had put on his fur slippers and was reading his favorite book. So she let some time pass by before telling him what the big dog had confided in her. Mr. Arcturus scratched his head and went straight to the magic book. He opened it and started flipping through it. When he got to the page with John and Jane, he stopped. They were a loving, adorable couple living in a wonderful, spacious house. "Fine," muttered Mr. Arcturus. "They have plenty of room, Mrs. Lalou," he said to his wife. "Which stars should we send?" "I propose Alfita and Betula, but first we have to ask them if they want to go too." "I will handle it," he replied. "It's time for these little troublemakers to go down to Earth and become happy little children." So, later in the evening, when all the little stars woke up, Mr. Arcturus took Alfita and Betula by the hand to their beautiful flower garden with the big white lilies. There, he explained to them that the time had come to travel down to Earth, become children, and fill the world with joy and laughter. The two stars were thrilled, mostly because they could be together. They loved each other incredibly, and even though they sometimes fought, they always kissed in the end and fell asleep holding each other's hand. Finally, the time had come to travel down to Athens. Mrs. Lalou had prepared a lot of delicious sweeties, and Mr. Arcturus had decorated the garden with colored lanterns for the farewell party. That night, all the little stars played together, laughed, and enjoyed the yummy bonbons. In the morning, when everyone went to bed, Mrs. Lalou dressed Alpha Baby and Beta Baby in their onesies to get them ready for the trip. Mr. Lelekas, the stork, would take them to Athens with his plane. By the time he came to pick them up, they were fast asleep, so he put them in a fluffy grip on his plane and set off for Athens. Everything went according to plan, and the two stars did not know they had arrived until they woke up the next night and realized they were in a small and super comfy nest. Betula, are you awake? Uh-huh, it's been a while. I'm getting quiet so I don't wake you up, but I'm hungry. Me too, Alfita said to her. What shall we do? Betula turned to Alfita and asked her, What's our mom's name? I cannot remember her name. Jane, Mother Jane. Betula approached the edge of their new nest, leaned against the wall, and began to cry. Mama Jane, I'm hungry. But she slipped and unintentionally gave a kick. Jane grabbed her belly. What was that? She wondered, but said nothing to John, who was sleeping next to her. But the little stars in her belly had an appetite for games, and despite being hungry, they started playing around. Jane was not sure she had two babies in her belly. She was thrilled and woke up John to tell him the good news. They both were overjoyed and began the preparations the very next day. Cradles, high chairs, toys, clothes. They got everything they could think of to be ready for when the babies would come out of Jane's belly. The house was filled with their loved ones, grandparents, uncles and aunts, and their little cousin. Everybody had brought a present for the little ones. So finally, the day came for the two little stars to go out into the world and become children. Alfita made the first move, and Betula, who was holding her hand, tripped over her when she suddenly stopped because of the bright light. Why did you stop? Don't you remember that Mrs. Lalou told us how from now on we will sleep at night and play by day? Time passed by, and the two stars, who were now two little girls, had yet to learn to sleep through the night, so they often wake up in the middle of the night and make some noise. Little by little, however, they got used to it, and thus the house of John and Jane got in order. There was still, though, a big problem. They did not understand what their mom and dad were saying, as if they were speaking another language. The problem was solved by Mr. Lelekas. One night, while bringing news and greetings from the Cloudville, he heard them talk about it, and after he straightened his collar in all seriousness, he told them, Here on Earth, every child has a name. You must choose yours, and next week, when I come back, you must tell me what you choose. Wait a minute, Mr. Lelekas. Is there a book of names for us to choose from? As soon as you fell asleep, tell Mr. Sleep to take you to his library. There is a book full of names. Pick anyone you like and don't forget them. Bye for now and see you in a week. Give lots of kisses to Mrs. Lalou and Mrs. Arcturus, they both said. At night, as soon as they fell asleep and Mr. Sleep came to take them to Dreamland, they asked him for the book of names. Okay, girls, but remember, whatever name you choose, you must not say it out loud because it will lose its power. Then how will we tell Mr. Lelekas? Betula asked him. You are going to whisper it in his ear. The name has to get to your mom and dad's heart so they'll know what you want to be called, okay? Both little girls nodded. Alfita even said it to herself over and over so she would not forget it. A week later, when Mr. Lelekas flew into their room, they both stood on tiptoe since he was really tall and whispered to him the names they had chosen. Alfita, while whispering, placed her hands on her waist and asked him, Well, Since we are not supposed to say it anywhere, how will Papa and Mama hear about it? Mr. Lelekas laughed. You are brilliant little girls, and you have chosen exquisite names, he said. Now listen to how things work in dreamland. I will breathe it in their dream, and that knows what to do. The little girls giggled and lay down to sleep. Mr. Lelekas did as he was told. He whispered it in the dream and touched the names next to the heart of Mom Jane and Dad John. They did not know them from the first moment, but when everything was prepared for the name-giving party, the names unfold and shine in the light. So when the day of the celebration came, Mom Jane and Dad John approached the two little girls who were happy and bright as the stars to tell them their names. Everyone attended this party. The grandparents, aunts, uncles, and their little cousin, Ira, another little star that had come down to earth a few years before. Everyone was quiet when John and Jane announced in one voice, "You are Lida, and you are Nefeli." The little girls clapped their hands in joy because their mom and dad gave them the names they had chosen. They were both so thrilled because immediately after that, they learned to speak the language of the people around them and understood every sweet sound of their parents. And they all lived happily ever after.